Hi everybody. I'm just recording this to show you how to render your scene with render canvases. I think I've announced that I would do this at some time, but so far I've never really gotten around to do this, so trying to show this in a quick and easy way. First of all, I don't know if you're familiar with render canvases, if you've ever used them. I found them to be a very powerful tool because you can not only render certain aspects of your scene as a separate render and then composite them together in Photoshop or GIMP later. When you set them up correctly, you have more control over your lighting and you can isolate figures like in this scene here. Let's say I want my main figure here, this mermaid, as a single render canvas or single render pass, then I can set up my render canvases to do just that. That means I can render the whole scene, all of this together, without going back into the scene and redoing the render just with a mermaid without the background. Another way to do this would probably be to delete all these kelp figures, all the background, but if you do that, the light will change and your solo figure you will render will look different than in the scene with a full background. Okay, just a short demonstration. First, I'm going to show you how to set up your canvas collection, and then in the second part, I'm going to show you how you edit them together in Photoshop with small tweaks. To set up render canvases, you go up here in your render editor to this Advanced tab, and then you have a second tab down here that says Canvases, and this is what you want. First of all, you check the canvas option and then you start adding canvases by clicking on the plus here. The first default canvas that will always load is the beauty pass. This is essentially your full picture with no alterations, but I'm going to add a few more here because I want a few different options. Okay, so each time you click a plus, another beauty pass is added. But down here you see you can adjust the type by clicking on this. You're getting this pull down menu with different options like specular, glossy, emission, light group, environment lighting, alpha mask, and so on and so forth. So you see this is very powerful with the different options. And I like to set up my canvases to render specular, glossy, emission. Emission is for light sources, self-illuminating or self-lighting surfaces, different kinds of lights. Then I like to go to environment lighting. So this would probably be my basic render canvas setup. In case I would want a pass that just uses this mermaid with the hair, the fins, and this kelp bra, I need to tell Dart Studio that it has to select certain items in the scene and ignore others. And the way I do this is, first of all, I'll go back to my beauty pass up here, check this alpha tab. That means by rendering a specific canvas, Dart Studio will just render the selected items with a transparent background. This is what this alpha means. Then down here in the node section, I click on Create from Selection. Right now I have none selected. And then I'm getting this pop-up dialog which says Node List Name. This is hidden under this little tab here. And by default, Dart Studio always creates a node list name that's called NL1. You can rename this to whatever you like, but in this case I'm just going to leave this, clicking on OK. And now watch down here in my node lists. Suddenly this NL1, this node here pops up, but so far we have not assigned anything to this node list, which we will do. Click on this little button here with the 3 dots. So in this menu I can select the items I want to be rendered. Everything I'm now checking by clicking into the checkbox will be rendered, the rest will simply be ignored. So adding all the elements with the hair, the geo shell, the tail base, body webbing, hair bangs, the dress, the brows. Very important when you have fiber mesh brows. Don't forget to check these, because if you don't, you will just have brow-shaped transparent holes in the face of your figure. Happened to me many times. It's very embarrassing. You see this arrow here indicates that there are certain items parented to the tail base, which of course are the antennae, side fins, tail fin, and back fin, which also have to be checked. Otherwise, you will have antennae, side fins, tail fin, and back fin shaped empty holes in your render path. Okay. Now we see we have all of these checked. Looks good. Click on accept. And the next thing you will just do now is you save your scene like this and simply render it. I'm going to show in the second pass how this result is going to look like and how we are going to post-process the different rendered canvases. Okay, stay tuned. See you. Okay, so now let's take a look how we edit the render canvases we just created. As you see, I have a couple of PNGs here in my folder. This is the one I want to edit, which I just rendered. And I have a folder of the same name with the render canvases inside. So this PNG render with the transparent background I just created is more or less a byproduct. I will only use the EXR files in this folder here for editing. I'm going to load them into Photoshop. I have a special plugin that helps me open those EXR files, but you don't need it in theory because Photoshop has the ability to open these files. And as you can see, while I'm opening them, they look sort of very interesting because you cannot really see anything. This is my beauty path, so this would essentially be the render, the plain render I need, as I said before, but it's all completely white. And the reason for this is this is an EXR file, which means it holds the complete dynamic range of the full image. And at the moment, the exposure is cranked up to maximum, so I cannot see anything. And I need to crank down my exposure to be able to see something. Again, in case you missed where I got this menu from, it's under Image Adjustment Exposure. Now I'm getting this menu, and you use this exposure slider here to crank down. And when I'm almost at the bottom here of my range, the image starts to appear. See, I can. I'm setting this to a value where I can see the image and it's not completely burned out white. It has no burned out parts, or it has no completely black parts, which is for me the ideal medium range I want. And I'm doing the same with all the other EXR files in here. Takes a minute for the exposure dialog to load. And you see when I'm dialing down the these values, every render looks a bit different. That's because they all, sorry, free-flying adventurous bird in my office. That's because all of the renders cover different passes. This is the specular pass before we had the environment lighting pass. So they focus on different aspects of the lighting or different settings. Okay, so I'm going through all this trouble because I want to use these adapted EXR files for post-processing. Okay, so If you hear odd squeaking, that's my bird. As I said, I have one of my birds with me in the office. The first thing I have to do when I want to edit is I have to tone this image down. Right now it's 32 bits per channel. Normally when we are editing color images we have 8 bits per channel, so I'm going to reduce my image range, and I'm telling Photoshop to not merge my image because I need my transparency retained. And now what I'm going to do is I've just dragged the second render, the environment lighting render, into an independent window. And now I'm going to use my manipulator tool, this universal tool here, this pointer tool. Click on the image. Hold my shift key and then drag this over. By doing this, I am copying this layer onto this layer here, and it will retain the same position. You can even do that if you have a free cropped motif here, and it will end up in the exact same position as on its original image. Now with this dialog here, which asks me if I want to convert my color depth, I am going to say yes. And I'm going just to click on OK, because it's going to try to preserve the color appearance, which is exactly what I want. So now I have this environment lighting path as my secondary layer here, and what I will now do is I'm going to use one of the many blend modes I have. This, for example, is overlay, but it's a bit too vibrant for my taste, so I'm going to dial it down a bit like this. Now next we're going to use the specular path, drag it over holding the shift key, yes, preserve, close this, I don't need this anymore, and as a blend mode now I'm going to use screen, which makes these specularity settings really pop. You can best see it here on the metal parts of her bra. And next is going to be my glossy path. Yes, okay. Close. And I'm also going to use screen, which is terribly bright at this setting. So I'm dialing this down. Last pass is going to be emission, and you see there is this little glowing dot which comes from the gem in her circlet, which is an emissive surface. And this also calls for screen. So you see there's a, and we zoom in here, can see the effect. See a slight bit of a difference. Okay, so I did use the alpha masking for the mermaid, her hair and all the tails and so on, only on this layer down here, not on these. So I want to delete the background in these layers, so I'm just going to load my selection, the selection down here, and when I invert this, I am just selecting the background, so I can delete all of this back here, and I'm ending up with a clean background with my very nicely edited and I think very nicely saturated basic render. Okay, so just for comparison, this is my original one, and this is with all the layers in there. So as a comparison, I'm just using the plain PNG render I got out of DAZ Studio just to compare these two. This is the unprocessed render I get from DAZ Studio, and this is the one I created with the help of this canvas method. Okay, what I can do now, I can save this as a PSD image, like so. I can now, of course, render the whole background of the scene without the mermaid, use the canvas technique with the same passes, edit them together, and then later when I'm done, I'm merging down all these layers and then just copy and paste the mermaid over onto the render with the scenery background. Okay, so this is the way it works for those of you who have Photoshop. But maybe you have GIMP, the newest version of GIMP, because it's also able to read EXR files. And I will show you with a quick walkthrough how this EXR editing works in there. So we don't need this anymore. I'm going to close the Photoshop, waiting for GIMP to start. So here is GIMP. If you're wondering, this is the single window mode of the most recent GIMP version, which is 2.10. And now I'm just going to demonstrate how this thing works inside GIMP. I have to find my project folder with the renders first. Okay, this is the one. So let's just do this with only 2 of those passes, because in theory you already know how this works. All right. Same view here. They both really look the same. Just fitting them into the view. You will find the exposure controls under different tabs than in Photoshop, even if this GIMP version looks a great deal like Photoshop. Look under Colors, Exposure. Then you get a menu that is very similar here. So we've learned that we have to turn down the exposure values here. So just grab this slider and pull it to the side, and you see the image here starts appearing. Here we go. That's okay. Same goes here. And you will notice I'm dragging them to negative values, so this is below 0, but that's okay. Now I'm adapting them to 8-bit color depth, which is under Image Precision 8-bit integer, and then you say just convert. Can do the same here. Convert. Now I'm going to copy all of this complete image by hitting Control A. And now I want to paste this as a new layer, which is important because you want to edit this as a new layer. Oh, I forgot. I have selected the whole image. Control A. Hit now Control C to copy, because before I had nothing to copy onto my new image, new layer. And here we go. And you see here we also have these overlay modes. Now right now it's opacity, but we want, oops, nonsense. This is the opacity, this is the blend layer, and we need screen. Now we use the opacity, same as in Photoshop before, to dial down the value. You can either use these arrow tips here by clicking on them repeatedly, or you can just drag down the opacity slider like this until you reach a look that is satisfactory. One more thing, if you want to save this as the GIMP native file, which is XCF, that's fine. If you want to edit this in another application that can read multi-layered images, I recommend you export this image as a PSD file. You can just enter the new file type manually and then select your target folder and then hit export. That's all. So GIMP doesn't automatically export to PSD. Okay, that was it. That's how you work with EXR files and how you post-process them in Adobe Photoshop and in GIMP, and how you create these things in the first place in Dare Studio. Hope you have fun with it, and thanks for listening. Bye!